Whoa, what is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video. Voice is starting to go a little bit. I'm going to be live tonight at about 6:40, and we're going to do the whole second day and third day on my channel, going over who the New York Giants are going to select with their remaining 7 picks in this year's draft. And the next 2 days are just as important, if not more important, than day one for the New York Giants. Of course, day one is the most excitement, but where a GM is going to make his money is the second and third days of an NFL draft. And we'll see how good of a job Joe Schoen does. Listen, it's year one for Joe Schoen. He was gifted the 5th and 7th overall pick, so I don't want to go above and beyond in terms of my praise for him. But Joe Schoen is the freaking man. Joe Schoen's the freaking man to be able to get the 2 players that he did. Now, they fell into his lap. I understand that, but I'm still thrilled at the 2 players that Joe Schoen selected. And I can't imagine almost any Giants fan, when they saw the way that the first round played out last night, not being pretty excited with the 2 players that the New York Giants were able to bring in. I'm also going to talk about at least at pick 36, where I could see the New York Giants going. After that, for today's picks, it's kind of hard to even guess what the New York Giants are going to do. We don't even know which players are going to drop. We don't know who they're going to take at 36 overall. But what I expect the New York Giants to do throughout the remainder of this draft is to go BPA. You know, like I've said all along, especially after you get out of the first round, I thought it was imperative for them to take a tackle. But especially after you get outside the first round, I think the Giants just take the best player on their board. There's so many holes on this team. I don't even care if you double up in a position. Get as many good football players on this team as you possibly can. What are they looking at in the second round? I mean, I think you're looking at a safety. I think you're looking at a corner. And I'll get into some specifics as to who the New York Giants could be targeting with that pick. But as far as day one goes for the New York Giants, the way it played out, I think a lot of us thought that they could definitely be going corner due to Don Wink Martindale's system and the fact that we may or may not potentially lose James Bradberry. It is really important to have strong coverage in a defense like that. But when the top 2 corners went in the top 4, that no longer became a possibility for the New York Giants, which immediately told me they're going to go edge. And of course, Trayvon Walker was already off the board along with Aiden Hutchinson. So to me, the obvious guy, if you're going to go edge there, was going to be Kayvon Thibodeaux. Some people may argue Jermaine Johnson, but Jermaine Johnson didn't go until like pick 26. So when you saw the way that these teams analyzed these players and, thought where these guys should be going, I think it was clearly evident if the Giants were going to go edge, it was Kayvon Thibodeaux. Maybe you want to argue Kyle Hamilton, but to me, it's not worthy of taking a safety at that pick over a guy that could be a high-impact talent at a position like the edge rusher. So outside of somebody maybe complaining that the Giants should have traded down, I can't really see an argument with that selection. And when you really saw the way the draft played out, I don't think the Giants were going to get a ton in a trade. Nobody was in love with a quarterback. The only first-round quarterback was Kenny Pickett, who I think somebody would have been out of their mind to trade up for a player like him. There were 9 trades, and not one trade was for a quarterback. So I don't think it was ever possible for the Giants to get a future first-round pick in this year's draft. So they stood put, and they got the best players they possibly could. The decision to take Kayvon Thibodeaux first was brilliant by Joe Schoen, and I think it was the obvious one, especially if they had a near-even grade, which Schoen later went on to say when he was asked in the post-draft press conference what his thoughts were at the tackle position. He said it was kind of 1 and 1A between Neal and Evan Neal, and at that point, there's only going to be one more pick, so you get your defensive playmaker first at 5, and then you go and get your tackle. And they ended up with, in my opinion, the best tackle in this year's draft class, and I think most Giant fans had him as their number 1 tackle, the guy they wanted the most. Evan Neal, if you go back and look, and Kayvon Thibodeaux were arguably the number 1 pick in a lot of people's mock drafts going back 3 or 4 months ago, and many people had them as the number 1 and 2 best 2 players until the combine came around and people started to alter their opinions. But most people felt like these were 2 of the top 3 or 4 players in this year's draft going back 3 or 4 months ago. The Giants ended up getting both of them at 5 and 7. If I would have told you in December or January or even February that the Giants were going to be able to get both these players at 5 or 7, you would have called me crazy. What allowed this to happen was the double up at the cornerback, and Thibodeaux fell to the Giants. And obviously the Giants didn't feel that the, supposed character concerns that Thibodeaux had should deter them from taking him 5th overall. In the end, the Giants filled their 2 biggest needs at their 2 most important, the 2 most important positions outside of the quarterback spot. Now suddenly you've got 2 bookend tackles for the next 10 to 15 years on the offensive line, and a guy like Thibodeaux is going to improve everybody around him on that New York Giants defense. Suddenly, Azeez Ojulari won't be getting double teamed. Suddenly, the opposing offensive line is going to have to pay more attention to the edge, which should help free up guys like Dexter Lawrence and Leonard Williams in terms of the pass rush. So that is going to help this defense out tremendously if Thibodeaux becomes the player that a lot of Giants fans and a lot of NFL fans think he could potentially be. So we'll have to wait and see how they become as pros. You can't really judge a draft until such time, you see these guys for a couple of years. But my initial reaction with those first 2 picks is it turned out as good as it possibly could. I think the only other argument that you could have said would have been a better scenario was if we got a guy like Sauce Gardner, but he wasn't available. Because like I said, you could at least argue that cornerback is more important in this defense, but he wasn't available, and there was no cornerback, especially after Stingley was off the board as well, that was worthy of taking. So I think day one worked out perfectly. And I think if I would have polled 1,000 Giants fans before the draft, what is your ideal situation? 700 of them would have said those 2 players going at 5 and 7 overall. So a great start to the New York Giants and a great start for Joe Schoen. Schoen came in here and said his primary focus, when you read between the lines, was going to be to address the offensive line. He did just that. He signed you 4 interior offensive linemen. He's now gotten you arguably the best tackle in this year's draft class to work across Andrew Thomas, and that should only help the interior of this offensive line. Now you'll be able to put those tackles on an island, and the guys in the middle could kind of help one another out if Evan Neal's as good as we think he could possibly be. Also, now when you analyze the trade down last year, it's kind of, it will work out if Evan Neal is good. We passed up on Slater. I never thought we were going to take Parsons. If Neal becomes close to Slater, you ended up getting a really good tackle and Kadarius Toney. So a great job by Joe Schoen. But I don't want to give him too many flowers because he was picking at 5 and 7 and they fell into his lap. Where we're really going to be able to judge Joe Schoen is these next 2 days. Round 2, round 3, round 4, round 5, and round 6. He's got 7 picks in those rounds. And you're not going to get a full grasp, like I said, in terms of how he did for a couple of years. But I'm excited to see the players that he brings in. In terms of the players that I think the New York Giants could be looking at with that pick, a lot of Giants fans like a guy like Leo Chanel. Could certainly go that way. Nakobe Dean is still on the board. A lot of people had him penciled in to be a first-round pick. It's a need. Middle linebacker, right? Blake Martinez is probably not going to be here much longer. And we don't know the type of player who's going to be coming off the injury. So I think Nakobe Dean is a pick that would really excite the fan base. But if you ask me right now, who is my dream pick for the New York Giants at 36? I don't really have one, but I'm leaning either cornerback or safety. I think we need a lot of help in that secondary for the New York Giants. And the one guy that really jumps off the page to me is Pitre, at least at the safety position. I've been a big fan of him as this draft is, drawn nearer. When I got to do a lot of research on him, I heard a lot of people talking about him, how well he would fit Don Wink Martindale's system. And Pitre to me is a very versatile piece in that secondary that you could kind of move around. He could do multiple things. Another safety I really like that the Giants could take there is Brisker. Brisker's an in-the-box safety. He's a hard hitter, and I could just see him thriving in what Don Wink Martindale wants to do as a blitzer off the edge, up the middle at that position. He's a hard hitter. I think he's a guy that would fit really well here. And of course, Booth, the cornerback that a lot of people had going in the first round. The question being, do you think he fits this scheme? And a lot of it will come down to that. But where my head is at with that 36th overall pick with the New York Giants right now, we could go so many ways. And there's so many talented players that are still there. We could also go wide receiver, but you could elect to wait a couple of rounds for that. There's a couple of players there like Watson, who had a really good pro day. You got Sky Moore. If the Giants do any of these things, I'll be happy. Because at the end of the day, we have so many needs. I want good football players to fill them. I want them to take the best available player on their board. Some Giants fans will talk about the possibility of Malik Willis potentially being drafted, and I have to at least talk about it because he's still on the board. Do I think the Giants will do it? No. I think they're committed to Jones for this year, but we'll see. If they think really highly about Willis, they did bring him in for a top 30 visit. I suppose it's possible they could take him. So if you're rooting for the Giants to take Willis, it's still a possibility. I think it's even likely that the Giants could potentially trade back as well at 36 because there's a lot of teams that could be looking to potentially draft one of these quarterbacks that dropped into the second round. So it's going to be a really interesting second round. In the end, I think they go secondary, but a guy like Nakobe Dean is certainly on the table. After that, we'll see how they fill out the rest of their roster in day 2. As the third round approaches, I think the tight end spot, the interior offensive line, the running back, all at least become possibilities. But it's going to come down to the best available player on their board. And we'll see who Joe Schoen thinks that is in about 5 hours. As always, guys, if you like what you watch, please subscribe. Drop a comment. Maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers. And this is not working. My mouse is struggling. Hold on one second, guys. There's a little blooper for you guys at the end of the video.